Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to everyone in this webinar about making an effective movement schedule. I see that we already have a number of people in, and for those of you who have been regular visitors of our Wednesday webinars, I just want to do a quick sound check. So my question to you is, can you hear me okay? And if you can, if somebody can just let me know in the chat. That's always very helpful. And I also see that a lot of people are already sort of introducing themselves, saying hi in the chat. And thanks, Sheila, for letting me know that you can hear me. I'll wait 1 minute more. I know we had a lot of participants, or at least people who registered for this webinar. So I want to give them, I want to give everybody the opportunity to join. So I'm going to wait for 1 minute and then we will start. So in the meantime, feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself, to tell us who you are, where you're from, which organization you represent. That's always nice. So let me wait one more second, I want to say, but a couple of seconds more, and then we will start. We have a lot to discuss around movement schedules. Okie doke. So we're going to start because we only have 30 minutes, and I don't want to sort of overrun on time. So, welcome to the webinar. My name is Roos van Stijn, for those of you who have not met me before, and I'm the Development Director with Fleet Forum. And it is my pleasure to do this webinar today with you around making an effective movement schedule. It is a repeat webinar. We did it already last year, but we got a lot of questions always in our trainings, but also when we talk to people around, okay, so how can we become better, or why should we become better at planning our journeys, planning our movements in our organizations? So we thought, like, okay, let's do another webinar around this topic. So I will sort of share our experiences and our thoughts around movement schedules for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then at the end of the webinar, we will have time to ask your questions. So before we do, let me enable the Q&A. Now, what you have seen in the chat is probably that you see a Q&A mode. Now, if you have a question, you can type it in the chat. You use the little question mark icon that is behind, that you can find in the chat box as well. And then you mark it as a question, and I can pick it up at the end of the webinar. Okay, so let's start. Movement scheduling. So what is it and why is it important? So let's start with the first one. So movement scheduling is when we aim to respond to all movement requests in our organization. And when we want to make effective use of the resources that we have, so that can be vehicles, that can be our drivers, in the most efficient way, so looking at the costs that it is associated with, but also with our two other priority areas, mainly the safety of the people that we are transporting, the people who we are meeting on the road, and more also looking with a sharp eye to the emissions that we are producing with our vehicle fleet. Now, movement scheduling it's a critical activity for fleet management. We always say, like, if you don't have good journey scheduling, movement scheduling, then basically it is almost impossible to meet those 4 priorities that you have as a fleet manager. And again, the 4 priorities are providing transport services at the most cost efficient way, with the least impact on the environment, in the safest way possible, and also in a way that it sort of that it supports the mission or the objective of your organization, and that is helping beneficiaries or providing aid to those in need. So movement scheduling is critical. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and use the chat box to type your answers. So, in your opinion, what do you think are the benefits of movement scheduling? So I'm gonna give you a couple of seconds to type your ideas, what you think the benefits are of movement scheduling or journey planning. We sometimes use different words. We sometimes use different words for it. I see cost reduction, reducing costs. It aids an effective carpool. Yeah, vehicle sharing. I saw cost efficiency in terms of fuel consumption, time management. Thanks, Morshid. That's a nice one. Yeah, and I do agree with all of them. So these are benefits that are really directly related to fleet management, right? And really directly related to your vehicles or the performance of your vehicles or the performance of your whole fleet. Now, when you think about let's say your colleagues who are passengers in your car, what is a benefit if you have good journey scheduling in place? What can you think about? So maybe picture in your head an organization where you have really good journey planning, movement scheduling, or one where you don't have movement scheduling at all. How does that impact, positively or negatively, the staff or the passengers in your vehicles? What will it do to them? I'm just gonna give it one more, see if somebody comes up with it. I see optimize. Yes, thank you, Agnes. Increased customer satisfaction. And that is one big benefit, apart from all the other benefits that you have been raising in the chat. Increased customer satisfaction is one of the benefits of movement scheduling, because you can imagine that if you are not doing any movement scheduling, then your staff doesn't know when to be ready for the trip. They don't know when they will arrive. They might arrive too late or too early. So these are all reasons that can impact. It can either reduce or increase your customer satisfaction. So, and I think that's an important one, because as fleet managers, we always have to realize that we are working to support our organization, and what we are providing to the organization is a service, right? The reason why fleet managers are there, the reasons why we have vehicles and why we have drivers, is to support the organizations, to support us in providing programs to the organization, so to make that successful. So that is an important one. Now, I also saw in the chat, I saw some of you mentioning about planetary health, the impact on the climate, the impact on the environment, and more, that is an important one as well. So the focus in most organizations is on environmental sustainability at the moment. And when you look at one of the methods to reduce your impact on the environment, or to reduce your emissions, is to start vehicle sharing. And vehicle sharing is the most effective measure to reduce your emissions. And we will discuss vehicle sharing a little bit later. But without movement scheduling, you cannot start to share your vehicles. So that is an important one to think about, is, okay, if in an organization, if you are working on reducing the impact on your environment, all the kilometers that you do not have to drive are the best kilometers. They are the best for the climate, and vehicle sharing is a good way to do that. But in order to do that, you need to do some movement scheduling, and your movement scheduling needs to be really, really in order. So that's sort of an important message there. Now, as a fleet manager, it's not only you who's concerned around movement scheduling, right? There's other people involved there as well. So we have our drivers, of course, because they need to be ready whenever you schedule the movement. We have our transport users. We just talked about that already a little bit. And what we want to do is provide them with the best service that we can at the time that they need it in the vehicle that is suitable for their trip. We have program managers, team leads, but also, of course, we have our finance colleagues and our human resources colleagues. And why finance and human resources are involved there is because how you plan your journeys, how you plan your movements, that has an impact on costs. If you do it if you do it in a good way, then then your cost will go down. If you do it in a bad way, then the resources that you need, both on the asset side, the number of vehicles, as well as on the human side, the number of drivers, that will increase as well. So that's where these functions or these colleagues are involved in movement scheduling. I'm going to ask you a question, and you can use the chat. And on a scale from 1 to 10, how satisfied are you at the moment with your movement scheduling? And let's say that 1 is, I see already people, but let's say 1 is that you're not satisfied at all. And 10 is like, yay, I'm perfectly happy. So I'm seeing an 8.7. That's very, very specific. I see 8, 5, 9, 7. Okay, so I think we have a number of people that are pretty happy with their movement scheduling. And I see also some people who say, well, this can improve, right? And maybe while you are at it, also write why you are either happy with it, or why you say, well, I can improve. Just give me a couple of keywords that we can pick up on later. So when we talk about movement scheduling, then you want to have some tools, right? And there's a lot of different tools out there, and I will sort of show you a couple. The easiest one that everybody can do is if you have in your office a whiteboard, or if you have an electronic system where you say, okay, every time I wanna collect the journey requests from my colleagues. And I want to know, okay, how many people are going? Where do we go to? When do we want to leave? And when do we want to return? That is easy, right? It is. You make a schedule like you see here on the screen, and everybody can install that. Now, of course, what is important here is that you need to set timelines when people need to make their requests known. And I see already George putting in the chat like timelines are not respected. And I think that is a common concern within the fleet managers community, that even though every organization has their policies around when do people need to request. Sometimes it's 24 hours in advance, sometimes it's a week in advance. That can really depend on security issues or security protocols in your organization. People are not respecting it, and people are saying, oh, but I have a last minute request, or this is an important meeting and I didn't know. And that happens, and we know that happens. So by making it visible, by making visible which colleagues are not respecting the transport deadlines, you can also then make a case to your country director and say, hey, because people are not respecting, we do need to have more vehicles in our fleet. And of course, more vehicles means more money, more drivers, and more risk on the road. And last but not least, more emissions that we are emitting to the environment. So make that So my message here is establish your tools, make a schedule like this, use it in a whiteboard, or do it in an electronic version, but also make visible who is not sticking to the transport rules. And I'm seeing that people abuse the term urgent. Yeah, I fully agree. I think that at some point everything becomes urgent, right? And I think as fleet managers that we need to make that known and saying, okay, well, these colleagues are doing great. They're always on time. And these colleagues are not following the rules, and that you also challenge that what they call urgency, if there is really an urgency or an emergency. So that's one tip. Again, this is another example of how you can establish your tools. This is in an Excel version where you can identify, okay, this colleague is going there, and how it helps is also that you can then start to look into, okay, vehicle sharing. Is that possible? Can we share vehicles if colleague A needs to go to the same destination as colleague B, and they will depart maybe within 15 minutes from each other, or maybe half an hour? We can share a vehicle then. And of course, by sharing a vehicle, we are again more cost effective. We are safer because we have less vehicles and less movements on the road, and we are respecting the environment by not polluting it more. Does that require one colleague to be a little bit earlier ready than what they had expected? Yes, it does. And I like what I saw in the chat is where somebody was saying, George, people are comfortable with the old system and don't want to change. And yes, that's right. And only by sort of making it, communicating about it, telling people why you are doing things, but also seeking support from your senior management, from your country director. It is a way how you can start improving your movement scheduling or your journey scheduling. A couple of best practices. So the first one, I think we already said, is agree on deadlines by which transport requests must be completed. And I saw somebody saying also learn to say no. I think as fleet managers, we are very, very service oriented, and we always want to provide transport to people. But also sometimes we need to say no if people are not sticking to the policies or the procedures that our organization puts on us, right? It's not our policy in many cases, it's the policy of the organization, and there are good reasons from the organization why they do things. You have to encourage that people stick to your policy, and one of the actions that you could do is say no. No, you're too late, and no, we cannot do this for you. Because if we are complaining about the fact that people are not respecting our deadlines, but at the same time we are still providing them with vehicles and with transport, people will also not learn, right? And that is sort of relating to what Mahmoud is saying in the chat, learn to say no, but also to what George was mentioning, like people don't want to change. But if we don't make them change, then they will never do it. Okay, so that's one. The second one is place your vehicles in a pool so that you can maximize efficiency and reduce the environmental impact. I know that many organizations already do have that, where there's no dedicated project vehicles, where the fleet manager decides, okay, we're going to this destination, we're going to use this vehicle, and the vehicles are pooled to increase efficiency. Another best practice is to assign one driver, because it makes it easier for your drivers to feel ownership, and also for you to manage the performance of the fleet. Now, what also is important is that when you scheduling your movements is one thing, right? You have the preparation where you make the schedule, but also because we are driving in dynamic environments, things can happen. Drivers can come in, drivers can be in a traffic jam, vehicles can get stuck somewhere. So you need to have a communication procedure and the equipment so that the drivers and the passengers can make contact with you if some delay occurs. Now, of course, it is also good and important to say here that your drivers should not use the communication equipment while they are driving or while the wheels are running or rolling, because that has an impact on safety. Another important part of your journey scheduling is also the evaluation. So we have the preparation, we have the actual movement as scheduled, and then also looking back whether your movement schedule was good, whether your plan was good. So keep logbooks, and more drivers, I think, are equipped with electronic logbooks. But keep some form of a logbook, either a paper one or a digital one, in every vehicle, because then with the data from the logbook on a monthly basis, you can see, okay, my plan was sound and this is a good plan and I can make future adjustments. Also, do plan some slack in between the journeys. Make sure that you allow time for briefings and debriefings. Talk to your driver before they go and point to them, okay, this is what I want you to keep an eye out for. I don't want you to speed. I want you to do this. I want you to check in after every 2 hours. Plan rest for your drivers. We sometimes forget that, or we sometimes leave that to the drivers themselves. And I would definitely recommend you not to do that. Make sure that in a trip, a driver at least has every 2 hours a 15-minute break. Also tell them to get out of the vehicle, then to stretch, to use the bathroom, to do any other thing than being in the vehicle, because driving is a very tiring activity. And as fleet managers, we also need to keep an eye on the safety of and the health of our drivers. Let me see. We talked about this one. I know what I would like to use 2 more minutes, and then we will go to the questions, is around vehicle sharing. So, like I said in the beginning, more and more organizations are looking into vehicle sharing opportunities, whether that is in your own organization. So that can be pooling, what we just discussed. But also we do see that organizations are interested to have vehicle sharing activities outside of their own organization. So we know that within UN agencies that already exists in some locations, but also we are also working on vehicle sharing initiatives in Lebanon. And we're going to start one in Central African Republic. So for those of you who are interested in vehicle sharing, then drop me an email if you are operating in those environments, and we can definitely have a chat. I also want to point out to you that at our knowledge platform, if you're not working in these locations, but you are still interested to set up vehicle sharing either in your own organization, or with a couple of organizations, we do have a starting guide with a lot of practical tips, a lot of tools, a lot of templates that you can need. And part of that is also how to look at your vehicles, your movement scheduling, and how can you identify opportunities in your organization, outside your organization, to reduce your transport. Okay, so that was it from my side. I know I took a little bit longer than I expected. Let me see. Do we have questions? Let me go. We use country-specific driving policy to enforce. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I don't see any questions, but I also do see that people are typing, so that's good. Yeah, okay, so I see a very good tip from Mahmoud. I don't know if you picked it up in the chat, but he says, I do weekly orientations to all drivers and remind them to keep an eye on the most significant rules not to be breached. I think that's great. I would even encourage you to do that every day, to take 5 minutes. It only will take you 5 minutes to say, okay, driver team, these are the 5 golden rules or basic rules that I want you to stick to, because people also need to be reminded sometimes, and 5 minutes. And it also creates a little bit of a community sense with your driver team, right? Like in the morning, we have a cup of coffee before we go out and check for the vehicles, 5 minutes. And we talk about movement scheduling, and we talk about the most important things that they need to think about. Let me see. Oh, yeah, I see a question from Dimi. Let me see. Publish. Let me. How do you manage the vehicle sharing in relation to different donor-funded projects? How organizations? Well, okay. So the first one is talk to the donors. Talk with your program staff who are talking to donors about, okay, dear donor, we want to participate in vehicle sharing because we want to reduce our costs, we want to reduce our transport movements, and we want to reduce our emissions. And most donors nowadays are sensible, and they say, yeah, you should do that. And then, so if you discuss it upfront with the donors, then most donors will say, yeah, that's what we want to do, or that's what we support. Now, then if you do the vehicle sharing in a pool, then of course you can say, well, we have ABC, we have 10 vehicles, they all belong to different donors, but we have discussed it with the donors upfront, and we are allocating some part of the the cost and the use of the trip of that specific program staff who is working on that specific project for that specific donor in the reporting. So it requires a shift in how donors are, or how your programs are looking at it. It requires discussions with the donors up front. But donors are open to it. And I was mentioning the vehicle sharing projects that we are involved in. The one in Lebanon was started with funding from USAID BHA. So that's one of the major donors. And the one that we are currently setting up, is funded by DG ECHO, the other big donor. So I would say donors are open to it. Let me see. Is there any sample of the vehicle sharing policy? Mahmoud, if you go to the Fleet Forum website, the knowledge platform, and you download the starting guide for vehicle sharing, we do have an MOU and I think also a policy in there. Have a look, and you can use it. You can rename it and work with it. Let me see if we have more. Let me see. No, I don't see any other questions. So then I only want to say thank you. And I hope that you will join us at the next webinar. Next week, next Wednesday, we will have an information session about the Fleet Manager of the Year award that we are organizing every year to put the spotlight on fleet managers. And we have announced that the application for Fleet Manager of the Year is open. And we want to do some sort of an information session about, okay, if you want to apply, what are some tips and tricks to think about in your application. So join us if you are thinking about applying for this award. And then in 2 weeks from now, we're going to do a specific webinar around safety management for motorbike fleets. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you in next week or otherwise in 2 weeks now. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.